This is a Kenmore combination washer and dryer on top. It's about 4 years old. I had it repaired last month because the dryer drum was having a lot of funny sounds, and there's a lot of up and down play in the drum and side to side play in the drum. And I had one of the repairmen come in to look at it, and he ordered a large series of parts. So the dryer initially cost about $1,100 installed, and here was $296 worth of parts, because just the dryer drum was rattling around. And so the parts were ordered and sent to my house, and then once I got the parts, I was to have two service people come in to install them, which is going to be then another $375. So the parts that were ordered were this top bracket on which the top of the dryer drum rests, and there's a series of 4 plastic strips which actually are called bearings. This one was worn only slightly. Then as we get to the top of the drum, it was actually worn and dented into the plastic, as well as wearing all the way through the so-called plastic bearing, and also worn deeply here and worn through this bearing. So this is where all the wobble came in. These pieces of plastic were worn through, and then the plastic frame was pretty deeply indented there. Also, what was ordered was the bottom part, and I could find nothing wrong with this bottom part other than it being filthy. So the bottom section of that dryer front was $150. The top section was almost $100, and then the rest were these little bearing strips. I'm not sure what the 45 was. I had to look that up. But mainly these little bearing strips were like $20 total when you add all those bearing strips up. There's a couple of metal clips that were ordered as well. But just the parts were $300. I think really if I had known about this and looked into it, maybe I could have just replaced those 4 plastic strips for $20 in my time, instead of $300 here plus almost $400 for the labor. I found one online video of this repair, but it looks like it was pretty close to this model, not exactly, but it was in Spanish, so I didn't get very much out of it. So I was trying to figure out how to get this apart enough so I could put in those 4 little plastic strips, instead of waiting 4 years for the plastic rim to wear through again, for the bearings to wear through, and then have a $700 repair bill. It just seems exorbitant. So trying to figure out how to take this apart, I thought I would start with taking off this slanted panel, which has a screw on this corner and a screw on the other end. So this is what it looks like with that sloping panel taken off. And inside the sloping panel is what looks to be a lot of instructions, including a wiring diagram. What appears now, the next step to get this apart is to take off this control panel, and it appears that I have to pull off this knob to get it to come down. So there's 2 screws inside the door. There's 2 screws on the side here, and 2 screws on the opposite side here that have to come off to get this panel removed. Of course, before I started, I did remove the power cord. So now we have one, two, three, four visible screws on the front here. So these two screws are fairly thick, short screws. What's a surprise is these screws are really quite long, and I can tell right now that it's tough to find out where they go back in. It's like there's all this open space, and hard to find where they're going to line back up to put it back together again. So with the bottom screws removed, that appears to be what's going to loosen up the bottom part of the panel. Next is to figure out how to get this apart at the top, which there's a top piece up here with screws in it. So on the top there's of course a lot of dust. I thought there wouldn't be this much dust after less than a month. And there's there's 4 screws on this side and 4 screws on that side to cover the top panel. My working guess is there's probably a screw on the side here holding the front together, and I'm hoping this won't fall apart too much if I remove a few screws. Besides the 8 screws on the top, there's also 3 screws in the back that hold this top panel in place. So I removed the top panel completely, but I've heard this cabinet is fairly fragile once it's disassembled, that it tends not to hold its shape very well. So I put back in place this half panel held in place by 4 screws to keep it from pulling apart end to end. And as I look in here, there's a couple wires I need to disconnect on this side, but it appears like there's not screws. It looks like it's hanging from 2 hooks on the top there and 2 hooks here, so it's not screws at all. So I'm not 100% sure these wires have to be disconnected, but as I look in here, what I see is that this bearing is not sitting flat. This one is sitting flat. This bearing is not sitting flat. And this bearing is not sitting flat, tucked under the drum. So it's like they've all either not been put together correctly or they've already shifted out of place in this brand new repair. And then the underlying plastic part is what wore through the last time. So I'm going to see what I can do to get these aligned and to get this front panel moved off. But it's not a very happy repair here. So indeed what I found is I just had to manually push up on this piece, and then it unhooked from these hooks on both sides. This wire connector did not have to be removed, and I'm not sure how well I'm going to be able to get these distorted pieces aligned properly, but they were not aligned properly for the repair. They actually had this whole unit on the floor, and I can see that to to put it on the floor, I'd have to disconnect these wiring harnesses to separate it. But I might be able to realign these. I could realign and replace the bearings without actually getting it on the floor. So I'll see if I can recover these and then put it back together again. So to get these 4 strips in place, what I found is the original plastic piece wouldn't allow it to fit in like this. So what I ended up doing was taking a little file like this and filing away at the plastic until I could make the entry point along here smooth enough to accept the plastic strip. Now what it appears from the original piece is that there's plastic pieces here and there's Teflon coated pieces, which are supposed to be 2 of them on the top. I'm not sure if it really makes a difference, but that's the way it looks like they're supposed to go. So it was not easy to get this door frame, front frame, hooked back here, hooked over on that side, and all 4 of these plastic tabs to be sitting flat and underneath the drum without popping out. So I had to really play around with it. The way it goes is there's a hole on the top of the plastic bearing which goes over a tab in the plastic, and then it tucks under the bottom side. Or anyway, so the drum turns this direction, and so it never really pulls the plastic strips the other direction, so they're just supposed to stay in place like that. I'm wondering of the usefulness to put a piece of aluminum tape to hold down this end of each of those plastic bearings so they don't pop out of place again. Or maybe they'll just stay put as is, as they're designed. But I now see I can replace those 4 plastic bearings without $700 cost, which is about what it came down to for the repair. So this is not an authorized repair, but I took this self-adhesive aluminum tape, cut it into strips that were basically dimensions of this little ruler, and tape the edge of the plastic strip, about a 3-inch piece, to the plastic frame so it won't shift out of place. So there's very little space on the frame for the downhill ones. There's a little bit more space as we move up near the top here, and I put 2 strips of tape, one near the edge of the frame and 1/2 under the strip, and then just a single strip for this other one here, just trying to make sure that the strip doesn't shift out of place. It probably won't. It's designed to stay in place, but I'm just adding this self-adhesive aluminum strip to try to keep it in place. Okay, both the washer and dryer are back in use. The reason I was able to move this panel, well, lift the whole panel up and then move it outwards and not have it fall apart and pull the wires out, was because I had the unit slid forward a little bit. All this stuff was taken away, and the top here was leaning against this, and I had towels on the surface of the dryer lid where the control panel was sitting down, and then this whole section was sitting on towels on top of the lid and then leaning against this sort of pillar wall section here. So it stayed in place without coming apart, and I didn't have to actually detach all the wires and put it down onto the floor to do the bearing alignment. And that would be the plan in the future, to replace those 4 bearing strips before they wear completely out and cause the $700 repair in the future. So it lasted 4 years last time, and then maybe I should aim for after 2 years replacing the bearing strips.